What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. I am really excited. I've got Eb Kieslich on the podcast today. He is a 6th Dan Judo Black Belt. He is a guy that's been training since his early teens, and now he's in his 50s, and he continues to train. So he's got tons of information on just the growth and the changes that have come to judo and grappling sports, as well as jiu-jitsu. He practices jiu-jitsu as well. Eb has just got some great philosophies on training, how to make sure you train safely without injuries. His thoughts on jiu-jitsu and judo, how can they complement each other, how they're similar, and he's just very knowledgeable. A few of his many accomplishments include winning the U.S. National Judo Tournament in 95 and 98, taking second in the World Masters in 99, and competing in the Bundesliga in Germany for 10 years, which is the highest level of competition. Just absolute pleasure to talk to him. So much information, so much knowledge. This is a podcast that I learned so much from, and I know you guys will too. Thank you to Eb for joining me. And enjoy the podcast, guys. It was so amazing to talk to him. And also, I got the privilege of being a part of a seminar that Eb did at our gym. And let me tell you, just from that short amount of time that he showed techniques, I felt like I picked up a ton of tips and a ton of things that are going to help my jiu-jitsu and my stand-up game. So thanks for checking out the podcast, and hope you guys enjoy it.
Now listening to the Jiu-Jitsu Therapist podcast.
We got always something going on. Today is actually a little quiet because I got most of the weekend. I had judo last night.
Yeah.
And today, which is Tuesday, I usually ride horses, but it's kind of hot out there.
Yeah. Do you have a farm? Do you live on a farm?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I got a farm out here. I got 65 acres out here in Meade County.
Oh, crap.
So I use it for everything I like to use it for, We grow a little garden and we have the horses, but I also use it for exercising. So I run and I do, all kinds of exercises here in the wood stuff too,
Yeah, so you've been teaching Matt a few things. He's been trying to throw me some. He's not a guard puller anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if he's ever a guard puller.
Yeah.
Matt's a great guy, though, man. Actually, first time I met Matt was we competed. His former jiu-jitsu coach, I guess Scott, had like a tournament. Uh-huh. And we competed against each other. So that was the first time I met Matt. And he's just a super nice guy. Probably one of the nicest dudes, man, I've ever, he's just really nice. I don't know. He's a nice guy.
He's got, I think you'll find that most people who train seriously, they have a pretty good character.
Yeah, Matt's awesome, man. He's just a nice guy. We've been getting him ready. He's got a match coming up, too, I think.
Right in July, right?
Yeah, and it's, I guess this guy's got a pretty good ankle, like leg lock game and stuff. So when Matt and I, whenever we roll together, I'm just going after his ankles left and right.
Yeah, to get him prepared for it.
Oh yeah, trying to. I don't even play my normal game, but I just kind of try to mess with him. Just throw him everything I can. So he's doing good. He's come a long way.
Do you do a lot of ankle locks?
Man, I've started to, and it's one of those things where if you play ankle locks and the other person has a chance at ankle locks, so it's kind of who's ever better. So I think sometimes it's kind of hard to commit to it, to say I'm going to work on this stuff because you put yourself at risk. But I do, because a lot of people are so good at defending, the chokes and the just defending the shoulders and, defending chokes. And, so I got to try at least go for different stuff to open it up. I try to mess with their legs so I can open something else up or vice versa. So, is there any leg lock, anything in judo, like leg lock submissions?
Well, the Ashigorami leg lock series, they are part of judo, but right from the early days on, I think there has been a lot of injuries, or there were a lot of injuries back then. And so Kano eliminated those from contests.
Gotcha.
And he said, actually the Katama no Kata, which is the ground fighting kata, right? It has ashigarami in it for as a demonstration. But, again, you can't do them in contests,
Yeah.
And it's just because too many injuries, I guess, occur with it. But, in Sambo, which is also a judo, has the same origin as judo. I don't know when it split off. There's some documentation about that, but they focused on it,
Yeah.
They focused on that. So it just didn't work for the judo, I guess. So
do you like leg locks? Is there something you teach or you practice?
We practice straight leg locks, and we also do some of the heel hook type stuff.
Yeah.
But just for practice, I will show it kind of like wrist locks. Wrist locks are also not allowed in judo.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've been caught in both of those, wrist lock and ankle lock. So, one thing that intrigued me actually was that, and Matt mentioned, he said you're in your 50s and you've been training consistently. And you actually mentioned, training consistently. So that's something I want to get into because my background is a physical therapist. So
yes.
I have my website is kind of geared towards like injury prevention for grappling and stuff. So that's kind of something I've started to develop, and that's kind of one of the things I'm really interested in. I want to kind of talk about, longevity in the sport. I think it's really, really, and I mean that could even be a whole other thing. I mean, I think we probably talk hours about it. So let's just discuss, kind of what your background is, how you got started, and how you ended up here, from Germany, and
Right. So I'm an engineer by trade. It's electrical engineer with a major in computer engineering, computer science, back from Germany, Würzburg Engineering School. And when I left the college, I was hired on with a German company that had a contract with the United States Army over, in Germany. And it was about simulation. When I applied, I had really no idea what this was all about. But I went and applied for the job, and I was, hired as the youngest person there on the staff. And then they sent me to Daytona Beach, Florida, for training at GE Aerospace. And I was in Daytona Beach for 6 or 8 months, something like that. And I returned to Germany and worked there for 3 or 4 years on U.S. installations, doing software upgrades, doing hardware upgrades, firmware upgrades, the whole 9 yards, So eventually that contract ended, a government contract. A U.S. company out of Baltimore won the contract, and they were going to make Fort Knox their hub for all of their upgrades and for all of their management and all that, So they contacted me because I had a special training. I had very specialized training that I received in Daytona Beach that the government said, if you can't hire somebody with these qualifications, you won't get the contract. So they were very keen on getting me to take this job. Right? So they processed my immigration paperwork and all of that thing, that kind of thing. So I really didn't have a lot of expenses with it. I just went and came over and had a job interview, and then pretty much started working after the all the immigration paperwork was straightened out.
Pretty well? Like, did you already pretty well spoke English? Had a good background.
Yeah. I spoke English because I had it in school already since 5th grade, and then I had it again in college, and then I was also trained on the job in Florida, So that was so the language was never an issue,
Yeah.
That was never an issue for me, and and then I came over here and started. At first I didn't find a judo club, but then I found one, in Louisville. I trained at Downtown Athletic Club, and at Bellarmine College had a club, so I went there and trained. For many years, I just drove from out here. I lived in Doe Valley. I drove to Louisville
Yeah.
And then
when did you start initially judo? At a young age? How old were you when you started?
I was 13 when I started.
What got you into it?
Really, in a small town where I'm from, there was soccer offered, some ball sports like basketball and tennis. Tennis was too expensive. Judo was offered in the town, and a friend of mine who was just over here, we've been friends since kindergarten, he's also a Judo Black Belt, and he's a police officer exactly my age, and he still trains actively, and he still competes at this age, you know. And he actually started judo maybe 6 or 8 months before me. And he says, "You got to try this." And I said, "Well, yeah, we're going to try it, you know." And I stayed with it after that, you know.
Yeah. So how was did you have breaks in, you know, with your career and everything like that? Just your job? Did you have breaks, or were you able to continue to train?
The only break I had is when I came over here, and I could not find anyone that did judo. I tried vigorously. You know, at the time there was no internet, didn't exist, you know. So I used these heavy yellow phone books, right, yellow pages, right? And I was looking around, and I was calling these numbers in Louisville, and nobody knew, nobody had anything. They said they had judo, but really they didn't, you know. So, you know, one afternoon I said, I'm going to try this again. And it was maybe 6 months I didn't do judo, but I did do a lot of running, a lot of exercising. I wasn't so sure I was going to be more in the U.S. more than a year or two anyway at the time, you know. So I set out to really find something. So I called a supplier, a store in Louisville. They were selling judo gis. Okay, I said, I'm going to try it from that angle. So a guy answers the phone, says, yeah, we've got judo gis, you know, and told me what brand names and stuff. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Who buys the judo gis? Right? Jiu-Jitsu didn't exist, right? So who buys these gis? And then he says, oh, there's Earl Cheatham. You know, he teaches judo at Bellarmine College and stuff. And I said, well, can you give me his number? And that guy didn't want to give me his number because I guess he was worried or whatever, you know. So I said, well, give him my number and tell him to call me, right? So sure enough, he called a few days later. He called and introduced himself and told me when they had class. So I was all excited, you know, and I drove to Bellarmine College. And I participated in his class, you know, and you know, immediately I guess he realized that I really know judo, you know.
What was your level? Do you have a certain rank at that time?
Yeah, I actually was a 3rd degree black belt at the time.
So, when did you? So you started training. How quickly did you work up to a black belt? How long does that usually take?
Well, it took, I was a black belt as I turned 20 years of age. Okay.
So about 7 years.
In Germany, it's harder than here, right? And it's harder than in Japan for that matter. If you're under 30, you have to compete and collect 15 points within that year.
Okay.
And that means you have to defeat a same rank brown belt 15 times within a year.
Oh, wow.
And that has to be recorded into a card signed by the referee.
Oh, my gosh.
So we would always carry these cards around, you know, and get that recorded. And if you said you didn't compete, right, in competition wasn't what you wanted to do, you could do that and still become a black belt, but what they would do is you would get a entry into your pass. We also had a passport for judo.
Oh, wow.
And that entry would say that you would never be allowed to compete ever again because you have an underlying medical condition or whatever it is, right? And you cannot get the black belt and then compete anyway. It's not allowed.
Okay.
It's like a one time only. You either compete or you don't compete, you know? And now if you're over 30, that requirement for competition goes away. You know?
Interesting.
That's just how it was. And you know, if you're over 30 and if it takes you that long to get a black belt, because you start there at a young age. Most people start at a young age there, you know.
What was the level of judo? do you think was, in Germany versus, in the United States or in Kentucky when you started? And what year was that when you made it to Bellarmine to start kind of training in the States? Do you remember what year it was?
I think it was 91 or 90, okay, something like that.
So 2 years before, UFC and, obviously Jiu-Jitsu and all that kind of started even getting known at all.
Right. So the level in this part of the country is still not very high. In Judo, where I came from, the level was very high, pretty high, because we had, just to give you an example, in this town of Würzburg where I lived at the time, there were 5 judo clubs.
Okay.
You had to basically compete against potentially 16, 17 people to win in the city.
Oh, wow.
So, then you go to the county to qualify, right? From there you go to the region. From there you go to the state. So you couldn't just go to the state championships.
I see.
Right? Just to give you an idea how many, it's typical that a club has 200 to 300 members.
Oh, my gosh. So you started competing in Germany? Did you start
when
you were young?
I started as a junior and competed quite a bit as a junior at all kinds of levels and did quite well. And then I started competing as a senior and also did quite well. I won a lot of bigger events, international events and stuff like that. And then I also, it's popular over there to have a team, to do team judo.
Okay.
Very, very popular. So you have the 7 weight classes represented, a team, right?
Yes.
And there's different leagues for that. And I competed basically in the Bundesliga, which is the highest league.
Right, okay.
Like in the soccer, the Bundesliga,
yes.
And in that league, you were able to represent 2 clubs, the higher league club and maybe your home club, which may be just a smaller club.
Yeah.
And so for a few years, I had competition matches on a Saturday and on a Sunday on the weekend.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty much like every other weekend like that.
Did that help with your nerves? I always ask people about nerves competing, at a young age. Yeah. Did you have a lot of nerves as?
Oh yeah, I mean it took a lot to get over all that. I mean, judo, any competition sport like that, I think it's really good to get used to that stress, to that pressure, that you have, and it just makes you. Tougher, I think. It just makes you tougher.
What did you do to acclimate to that? What was some strategies that you used maybe, as a young guy and then now even if you're older and you're competing, what were some things you did to kind of control those fears?
I think what helped me was when my coach explained to me back then that you have to assure yourself that you're prepared well, that you have done everything,
right.
Just the day of the event, what was always important is the nutrition. Even if you're underweight, right? If you had to drop weight a little bit, and you couldn't eat just then, we would still eat, but very little, okay. Right? And and just make sure that you don't shut your system down, because that's the worst thing you can do is not eat and not drink. Then you shut your system down, and then you're not able to fight, So, we were at the tournament site, we would always be sure that we follow all of those common sense and those kinds of things, right? So that kind of gave you confidence because you knew you were doing things right. You weren't just out there experimenting some new thing, and I still do that the same way today. If I had to compete, I don't compete now anymore. But if I had to compete, I would do the same thing. I like to also not watch other matches. And I tell my students not to watch matches.
You tell them not to.
I tell them to just watch their weight classes or things that are relevant to their own performance. But I tell them not to watch a whole bunch of kids and a whole bunch of other weight classes, and others, because you're not there to be a spectator. You're there to be a competitor. And when you're sitting there watching stuff, it wears you down mentally, you know, because you're putting yourself constantly into their situation and you think what you would have done different. All of that is wearing you down mentally. So we would go outside and just not watch that stuff, you know.
Yeah, I think there's two different strategies. My jiu-jitsu coach, he kind of said, we went to the Master Worlds in Vegas. I think it was last year.
Yeah.
First big tournament I did, IBJJF. It was the first one I did, the Master Worlds. And the guy I was paired against, we kind of got our brackets, and he was a Judo Black Belt.
Yeah.
So I thought, I just watched a couple of, and I don't really like to do that even. Because I just don't want to get in my head. I just want to worry about what I'm going to do. And so, I watch some of these videos on YouTube of him competing, and he's a Judo Black Belt. I kind of hear that, and I figure he's going to, try to throw me. He pulls guard. We clinch up, we grab the gis. It was a gi competition, and he pulls guard on me. He pulls me into his guard. So sometimes it can definitely backfire. You can be prepared for something, and something opposite will happen. So, but I do agree. One of the things you said, I did that too. A couple of tournaments, just went outside and got away from it, because your emotions go up and down all the time. It's just
right.
It's hard.
Right. I watch things that are relevant if I can. There were some of them, when I competed over here in the nationals and stuff. There were guys that I ended up fighting in the final. And I had never seen one match of theirs, because immediately after I came out, they went in.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were done quick, and I never got to see what they did, and they did different stuff. So I was completely unprepared, like could be anything, right? And I did fine with it,
Yeah.
If you can't see it, you got to take everything in consideration. If you can see it, if you are there to watch, you can definitely see a few things in their approach.
Right.
That might be very helpful. Okay. But you got to have the eye for it. And it's not like, oh yeah, he pulled guard, or it's not so much that it's what their stances are in judo, and what his gripping strategy is. Because so much is in judo, you can literally, the match can get away from you on the gripping alone. You never get a chance to do anything if you're not careful, if you're not prepared, for that. So
is that one of the things you preach a lot, or you work grip fighting? Some of you guys work a lot in judo.
So the grip fighting, which we call the Kumi Kata, right, is the skill of the competitor, and I only teach it at brown belt level.
Okay.
So the reason I don't teach it earlier is because people with good grip fighting strategy, you can basically kill everybody's technique, and you can get by without being thrown and all of that, and it defeats the purpose of the actual attack. And then they won't learn their openings.
Okay. So as a learning tool, as a learning strategy, but
yeah, what you do when in the curriculum is kind of important.
Okay. Right.
It's kind of important. See, Kano, the founder of judo, he defined these things like you should do stand up first and then learn newaza, right? Ground.
Okay.
He believed that younger people have more of a benefit from the stand up judo. They learn their balance, and they learn how to get to the ground and be safe and all that. And then when they do a lot of ground fighting, then they can get that caught up a lot faster.
Okay.
So you're not missing so much. That was his idea. And with grip fighting, it's one of those things. You could show a guy, a beginner, how to grip fight and play with him. And after a few months of exercising in the club and grip fighting tenaciously, you can't throw him anymore. But that means also that he didn't really learn so much in the middle, right?
Okay.
He can defend by not avoiding the grips and stuff, right? But that's not what it's there to learn, you know. So you got to kind of balance the competitive side of it with the martial arts, the art itself, the background, what you're trying to accomplish. So you want to be able judo is a game like jiu-jitsu, a game of attack and defense, right?
Yes.
It's about attack and defense, and the idea, if you want to use judo as a self-defense, the person is coming at you, and you have to have that feel where his balance is to turn around and throw, right?
Okay.
Quickly, without preparation, potentially without much gripping or anything, right?
Okay.
That feel you can only develop if you do a lot of what we call taisabaki dori, practicing throws, practicing entries into throws.
Yes.
In a free moving scenario, not necessarily competitive scenario, but in a moving scenario. That's where you learn that stuff, right? And then you go on and get more into the competitive side of it, and you look for these openings. But it's like you wouldn't know what an opening is if you didn't know the feel for the throw that you're trying to do. Okay. If that makes sense.
It's interesting. It's a different. It's definitely different. The different kind of order of things, you know. I think obviously in jiu-jitsu you learn the ground stuff, and then, you know, then when you get a little better, a little more controlled, then you learn the stand-up and the takedowns. And I mean, you try to teach that to everybody, but I think, you know, if I had to say what the first thing I learned was probably closed guard, you know, closed guard position. I didn't learn a takedown. It wasn't the first thing I learned. I learned, you know, I guess it depends on the martial art or the sport. You know, obviously wrestling is going to be just takedowns. That's interesting. It's interesting. It's an interesting way, because I feel like, in my opinion, you know, not in judo, but a jiu-jitsu perspective, you've got to grip fight, and you've got to do that from a very, very early time. Because if you get good at grip fighting, then, you know, then you can impose your will and impose your setups and positions, or, you know, defend. So that's interesting. It's a really interesting concept, because when you started talking about not teaching grip fighting, I was like, that makes no sense to me. You know, I was like, why would you not teach grip fighting? Why don't you teach somebody how to get their grips? But it does. It kind of almost closes people off, and you don't open up, and you don't, like you said, learn the entries and learn all the different kind of the weight shifts and all that stuff. So that's a great point. I think that. And knowing how to throw and be thrown is important too. Knowing how to be thrown and land, you know, and break fall. I think that's also hugely important.
Absolutely. You know, I do a lot of newaza. I do a lot of, we call it newaza, ground fighting with Max and with others. And I've always looked at my requirement for judo as a martial art and as a competitive sport. And I try to line these up the best I can. I rarely see me do anything that is purely sports to get a score.
Okay.
I pretty much try to avoid those things just to score, and look more for something that also has a combative value. Okay. Right. So I don't. When I throw, for instance, it used to be back in the early days of judo that when you threw, you had to maintain your stance. Okay. You couldn't roll over with the guy like we do nowadays and stuff like that. Or the throw wouldn't count. Okay. And I think there's value in that to an extent. I never like to throw and then fall over and be in a worse position than if I hadn't thrown. Yes. You know. For the follow-on ground game, especially if it didn't count for a full point, and then you're in a pin, you know. But I mean, there's ways to mitigate that, and they are doing that nowadays. But I think there's just value in knowing where you're at and keeping your balance, you know.
So staying upright, essentially, not falling, staying upright the whole time, not necessarily keeping the same exact stance, but just being on your feet.
Yeah, just knowing how you can deal, you know, how you can do the throw, and you have a stance, and you transition from that into the ground. Okay. You know, to go on. Now you could be a little lower, and you can maybe land into a pin. Okay, but not to where you topple over and then you're in a worse position. That's stuff I don't do.
Describe what a pin is. What exactly is a pin?
Osai Kumi, we call it Osai Kumi. So to us, there's 3 ways to score in the ground game. Okay, all of them are basically a submission. You do a choke,
yes.
right? To a submission, same as in Jiu-Jitsu, tap. There's no scores given for guard passes or anything like that, or taking the back, or there's no scores, immediate scores for that. Okay. Then there is a submission from arm lock, udagarami, bent arm lock, or straight arm lock.
Okay.
And then you can also win by holding the person on his back.
Okay.
And that's called the Osai Kumi. Nowadays, you only have to hold him 20 seconds on his back.
So you have to basically, so you have to control position. If you're in side control, whatever, you have to basically keep him flat.
Your legs cannot be entangled with his legs.
Okay.
So it can't be a half guard, right. For instance. You have to have, there's 4 basic directions to pin, which you call north-south, and scarf hold, and side control, and mounted position, right?
Okay.
In English, those are what they are. If you have any of those positions, a timer starts, the referee signals that this is a hold down, and then after 20 seconds you win the match. So just as if you submitted him.
Can you go from position to position? Can you go from north-south to, side control, whatever you want to do? You can do that as long as they're down.
And you can go to a submission anyway, right?
Got it, okay.
That doesn't matter, right? But you can, as long as your legs are not entangled, you can go between positions and keep him on his back, and that's actually encouraged if need be, right?
Sure.
They want you to be able to do that. And we spend a lot of time in that control, being able to hold the person down,
So if somebody gets their legs entangled or gets in the half guard, they stand them back up, or what's kind of the process?
Here's the thing, right? If the position does not qualify as a pin,
yes,
and it does not, after trials, various tries, does not lead to a submission. They have been tried, or nobody does anything if they just lie there, right? What happens is they stop the match and stand them back up. If you keep trying and you're changing the position along with it, they let it go on.
Okay.
But you can't, that's why we have so many flips and stuff on the ground in judo. Mm-hmm. Because when you change the position, then it starts over. You get again 3-4 new tries. Okay. Right? So we try to change the position in order to be able to go on if you have a good position, So you have to demonstrate progress.
Okay.
If you show progress, then you're okay. Years ago, when I started judo, one of my first judo matches was 5 minutes, and it was all ground. I mean, we grabbed each other, and one guy went down, and we would try to grapple and pin and all of that stuff. And then we stood both up and we went on. There was never an interruption. It was the full 5 minutes just fighting and ongoing action, And I like that, but it's just not how judo is nowadays. They stand you back up.
So they see you just kind of moving around, nobody's really progressing, they'll just stand you up.
Right. It's a lot less than, say in the late 80s, that was the worst. Judo was basically, I think, at its worst with the standing up. Interruption of the flow of the match. The referees were just too much involved, and they're getting away from that now a little bit.
They constantly stand people up. They'll constantly stand them up.
And about stupid stuff like, single-sided grip or the gi out or whatever it is. They interfered too much. I think at that time. It drove me crazy even back then.
Do you think that was for visual appeal, for excitement? Because of the stand-up being more exciting?
I think to be an Olympic sport, the Olympics is like, I guess, the most watched sporting event, right, in the world, right? And with judo being so popular worldwide, and you know the airtime it gets, and people watching, and all that, they wanted to manipulate the rules to make it so attractive, right? So you would only see the throws.
Yeah.
Right. The you know the most appealing part of the judo, I guess, is the throws to some people. And like now, I'll give you an example. There's the same thing is happening with MMA right now.
Okay.
People don't want to see a small wrist lock down in the corner or by the fence that nobody sees, and one guy taps.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And they're both. Nobody got hurt. Nobody even has a bruise. They wouldn't want to see that.
That's a good fight, though. That's talent, that's skill, and that's strategy.
We like that. We like that.
Yes,
right?
we do.
Because that's the skill of the martial art, right? But no, that's not what they want to see. They want a guy brawling, yelling, be obnoxious, and get knocked out. Okay, that's what they want to see.
That's the stuff. You're right. That's the stuff that you see on these videos and like these things that go viral. This guy,
a thousand times they'll play the same thing where a guy gets.
The guy starts talking or taunting, and then he gets
Right.
I love that, and people love that. It's like it's karma. It's they're they're getting what they deserve. I guess. I mean, I don't know.
And that thing, right? That kind of idea was there with the judo. I'd say other sports too. I mean, other sports went through rules changes to make it more appealing, right? And not just martial arts sports. I think other, soccer perhaps, and who knows, right? To make it more presentable and more interesting and all this. And I think when you're looking at something like judo or jiu-jitsu, we just have that. To us, the competition is only one aspect, right?
Okay.
The art is another aspect, and learning the art and learning and the full curriculum that's behind it is another aspect, right? So the true competition is where it's supposed to come all together, okay? And actually work and be, you got a black belt, you're in the Olympics, you got the full potential, all the techniques, and you got the fitness, and you're supposed to show it now, right?
Right.
That's the idea. But when you're making the sport so athletic, you're shortening the times, and you need to have only young guys competing, then you're giving up on some of the other aspects to make it more presentable, right?
Well, what do you think? How does that? So, in your opinion, you feel that hurts the sport, hurts judo for you? With them standing because they messes up the flow. But do you think in the long term it could help with popularity and help more people get into judo? I mean,
sure. And I thought about something that I wanted to tell you because you talked about it when we first had contact. About judo and jiu-jitsu or BJJ, I think at this point you could do very well for yourself if you combine them, right? Okay. If you practice in judo and in jiu-jitsu, unless you come to a club like mine where you're training 50 and 50 anyway, 50% up and 50% down, and I go to jiu-jitsu seminars. At various places around, I go out to Bruce Shepard in Evansville, and I go down to Josh Johnson and train with Luis Polaris, So I have a lot of jiu-jitsu around me, and several of my students do also train in jiu-jitsu. But even without that, I would do 50% ground and 50% stand-up. Okay. But if you wanted to do both, if you can do both, that's the best thing I think you can do these days. For one, the two arts are extremely compatible. They are, very few things are as compatible, right? You could probably say volleyball and beach volleyball, right? Sure. Or something like that, or, rugby and football. I mean, things that are very similar in nature, you can very easily combine. So I think the judo people could learn from the jiu-jitsu in the methodical approach of going into submissions and
Yeah.
approaches that are unlikely to happen in a judo match because of the time limits.
Yes.
Right. And the other thing we already talked about, there would be submissions you would practice that you don't do with a combative value, like leg locks of certain type and wrist locks, etc. You would practice those more in a safe manner, and then you could. You could just overall spend more time in the guard and in these positions and get more rounded by just having more time there. I would say that BJJ could learn a lot from the judo also, right?
Okay.
So what they would learn is, of course, for one, the stand-up game, right? So I think one of the biggest shortcomings there is really that they neglect that for a long time, and I know where it's coming from. It's because the Gracies said, every fight goes to the ground and stuff like that, and that's not totally true. I mean, it's presented that way with the UFC, but it's again a sportive environment. A fight in the street may not go to the ground. Or you may not want to go to the ground because there's glass there or there's vehicles or, whatever it may be. The situation, it could be such that you just don't want to pull guard, or you just don't really want to tangle up with this guy and then kind of get on the ground and fight him on the ground. You may not want to do it where you're at, right? Uh-huh. So I think having a good stand-up game that puts you on top when you get on the ground is a very, very useful tool, however you look at it. I think it's classical. It's just it was misrepresented by the Gracies. I think there's, and if you look at it, what actually bothers me about that is that the Gracies are all black belts in judo, and they come around. They all train judo as kids, and they come around and tell others, you don't need it, So that's the only thing that bothers me about it, right? So they all have it,
right? Okay,
but that's for promotional reasons and so forth. So anyway, you would get the stand up from it and the quick transitions, because I see guys that come from the jiu-jitsu come to my class. They finally learn how to throw, and their throws look pretty good. And then when they're done throwing, they're trying to settle for a jiu-jitsu approach, like guard, like take the back, where they can't combine them fast enough from standing into the ground to secure something quicker, So working within the time limit has also its benefits. It is bad in a way, but it also gets you to play the game with a stricter purpose in mind, right? So that's one other thing, and then of course the osaikomi, the pinning, right, the holding down. I think that should not be neglected. There's great value in that because that leads in a lot of cases. That actually leads to submission.
Yeah. And as far as the approach, you mentioned it. It's different in judo and jiu-jitsu, and the thing in jiu-jitsu is you teach position before submission. So you want to establish and hold a position, and then once you have that position, have your points or whatever, then you move on, progress, go for submission. So I think, in my opinion, not training. I mean, I've done a little bit of obviously just some throws and nothing formal judo, but I think. In my opinion, as far as for controlling, someone or controlling them on the ground, I think the pinning is good, but also the being able to, not lose position, because I feel like that can be dangerous as well. If you go for a submission and you don't secure it and you lose position, you can find yourself in a bad spot.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Now. Neither one of us made the rules, or neither one of us created judo or jiu-jitsu, right?
Yes.
We're just practitioners of an. If you had the option to create your own system, right? Yes. Not jiu-jitsu or judo, but just your own system, right? You would put things in there that are maybe shortcomings in one or the other, but by the time you get it all wrapped up into a system that's being practiced by many, with scores, with a sportive sense, with exercise benefit, and all of that, you would develop other shortcomings.
Yeah.
I think martial arts, as old as they are, to the beginning of mankind, have always been around, and they've always had their set of shortcomings. Military, because I'm in training, doing stuff with the military, we use simulation and various mock-ups and things like that, because you can't really shoot somebody dead,
Yeah.
In training, right? And so you're using a sensor to tell the guy you've been shot, right? Stuff like that. And we're using a tap. Yeah, you would have broke my arm.
Right.
Maybe you wouldn't have. There's still a possibility it wouldn't have happened, right? But we're smarter than that. We don't want to take that risk, right? Absolutely. But so what I'm getting at is martial arts is a very complex topic. There are several approaches to practicing it. Each one of them has its benefit for its purpose.
Yes.
And each one of them is good in a way. After the Gracies won all of these events, these challenge matches, like sports like karate got a really bad name, said this stuff just doesn't work, and all that. And I don't agree with that either 100%, I knew even then that if you put a judo guy against a karate guy, that the chances of the karate guy of knocking out a judo guy or killing him, are very slim. Because I trained actually a little bit karate, and I knew this wouldn't work. But you learn other things there, right?
So why do you think it wouldn't work? Why do you think judo was effective against karate? Just the distance?
Because we do our stand-up game is like I don't know if you've ever watched or looked at the judo stances. They're not fancy,
right? Kind of up and straight up, right?
Straight up and knees bent, right? Mobility. And judo is designed that when you walk down the street and you don't know what's happening and somebody attacks you, that you don't have to first go to a fighting stance. Yeah. You can just take it and do it, right?
Okay.
That's why our stances are not very spectacular, But in karate, you have these stances because they explode out of these.
Right. Set up attacks.
Right. And the way they punch and all of that, when you practice it for a while, you're going to get a little bit better at punching. Probably, I don't know if it's as good as boxing. Though boxing has other problems because you're always having a glove on. So at any rate, it's a complex situation, but each one of them has a certain purpose, and it should be recognized for that. That's what I think.
Yeah. What about kind of the split? So you said obviously the Gracies were all black belts in judo and stuff. When you saw them kind of have their own thing, and then the UFC started, and a lot of jiu-jitsu really started getting some popularity, or the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu, with Royce Gracie, did you feel like there was like judo had a big part in that? It wasn't just jiu-jitsu, it was judo.
I'll tell you what, I was a fan of it. I liked Royce Gracie. I haven't ever met him in person, but I really liked him. I just thought it was great that what he did, a huge accomplishment, and I identified with it as this is the same stuff I'm doing,
Okay.
Minus, we never did striking on the ground and all that. But to me, and any layman, anybody that has practiced judo, and you watch the first UFC fights, that's exactly how a judo match would look like against a brawler or against a boxer or something like this. This is what we would do, guard pass, arm locks, all that stuff. It looked very much like that.
As far as the stand-up game, though, he did. He threw a lot of front kicks. He threw a lot of front kicks for distance, and then
absolutely.
I don't remember as far as if he got. I know he went for some takedowns. I don't know if he got taken down or what exactly happened. He clinched up.
Well, he didn't do any turning throws, and probably they, the other thing about that is they did all these challenge matches already in Brazil.
Okay.
In Brazil, they called the stuff Judo, and so they were already exposed to MMA or to no-holds-barred type matches, and they probably eliminated anything that could get them in trouble. So a turn-in throw against somebody who doesn't have a gi is risky unless you're really, really good at it, right?
Yes.
So they eliminated all of the techniques that judo has that would maybe work in a street fight or, in various situations, and tailored the whole thing for a challenge match in an environment like that, where there's a mat down and a fence or a border against it, and all of that. So they adopted, adapted their style to this kind of fighting,
So, in your opinion, like, what's the difference really between judo and jiu-jitsu? Then it sounds like there's so many similarities. So, what you've seen, I mean, obviously some rule sets, ankle locks or wrist locks or, time on the ground. But what do you feel like are some of the main differences? Is there any other differences, or you think it's mainly similar?
So when I look at something, right, I look at the underlying principles. How do they practice? What do they do? And there I find really more similarities than differences. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, judo has two basic underlying principles. The one is the mutual benefits concept, which is also very strong in any jiu-jitsu club that I've been to. Mm-hmm. It means that you get better in the group. Everybody plays with everybody and is careful not to injure the other person.
Right.
It has to be a mutual benefit, right? It's this concept, mutual benefit and welfare. And the other one is the maximum efficiency concept, which is exactly the same as in Judo and JiuJitsu, which is that you're never really satisfied with how you do it, but you always look back to the instructor. In our case, we call him sensei, and you call him professor, to improve your own technique, and you never stop learning. You have an open mind, and you never stop learning, right? So these are the principles that are deep ingrained in the judo people and in the jiu-jitsu people. So if that's what it is, that to me makes the art work. That's the biggest foundation, more so than the rule set. Because the rules have already changed over the years in judo, and they will also change in jiu-jitsu, or have changed, right?
Well, yeah,
and
absolutely.
It'll take it somewhere else, but to learn the skill of the art, you do it by those same underlying principles. So there's more similarities,
Well, and you brought up kind of a good point. As far as when you train and when you spar, you can spar pretty close to, 100%. You can probably go 100% and just don't, obviously have control in the submissions or, but that's one of the things, because I think the real life, how applicable is to real life, because you're actually able to exert, maximum effort or, try your best to throw somebody. And in some sports, obviously, boxing or whatever, you've got protective equipment, or you're not going 100% because you don't want to hurt the other person. So I think that's one of the things that I think helps people relate it to real life self-defense, because you're actually doing it at that speed. So you're used to, it's not like it's like you're in practice and then you go to the game and the game is totally different speed or different, it's just the intensity's different. You can have intensity levels, in judo and jiu-jitsu that are very high.
And we do that. If you ever come, you're welcome to come to my class, and you'll see how the beginning of the class is very structured. I mean, actually, the whole class is very structured. But we go through a whole lot of exercises to improve on our balance and our turning ability. And I go around and evaluate these guys, and they get better and better and better at it. And then after the class, we may do some sparring type exercises as part of the class. But after the class, we open up the mat for free sparring. It's one stand up, one ground, one stand up, one ground. You know. And if there's few, I let the whole thing go from stand up to ground and go on in the ground for about a minute or so, you know. So there's, I believe in going up to a high level of competitiveness, but with control.
Right. No, that's a great point. Yeah, exactly. You can't crank on somebody's ankle, you know. If you have the submission, sometimes the person doesn't want to tap, you just let it go, and you know, just go from there because you don't want to hurt the other person. And that kind of, brings you up to a point. So you said, what kind of things do you guys do as far as accessory work for your hips or your throws? What kind of techniques or exercises do you like to implement?
Yeah. So I think one of the things you have to do with the judo, more so than if you're doing the jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is popular and has gained popularity because you can pretty quickly, when you eliminate the problem of falling to the ground, you can pretty quickly teach somebody how to grapple a little bit, right? Guard and this, and then you teach them a few submissions and tapping, and you can pretty quickly get some new person introduced to the game, and they can then come back. After so many months, they get a stripe or whatever, and they're in the system. The approach is not as simple in judo. It just isn't. You can't do it like that. You have to. There has to be a little bit more authority to the teacher. Okay. Because you can't have some hothead throwing harder than the other guy can take the fall, for instance, right? Okay. So there has to be a little bit more discipline in how the class works out.
Well, I think there is. Look at beginner classes. We do a lot of positional. Sometimes we'll do free rolling, but sometimes it'll be just positional pass and defend. And
don't get me wrong. I don't want to say that you don't have the discipline.
Right. It's just a different approach. I understand.
But even if you didn't, I think you do. I mean, most classes are pretty organized. I've seen in jiu-jitsu. Even if you didn't do that, I think if the people have the basic understanding of tapping and this and that, injuries are not so likely to happen, especially among beginners. Sure. Right. Where in judo, if they don't concentrate and if they want to do their own thing, injuries will happen, right? So a lot of time is spent in teaching them a lot of agility drills, basically a lot of overs and unders where they get up and down and have to do stuff. They're stretching. There's all kinds of calisthenics involved to get them shaped, to get their body shaped for balance, and at that point they're more robust to actually take an unannounced fall, right? And then they learn the break falls. See, a lot of people think the break falls is all it is. You teach somebody how to fall, and then you can throw them every which way, and that's not how it works. You have to prepare the whole body for the break fall. Okay. I mean, it's when at the point of impact, several things have to work together, right? You have to be able to exhale. You have to slap the ground with your forearms. You have to tuck your chin so you don't have your hip whiplash back. If your throw doesn't have the height, you have to be able to complete the turn so you land in a way that you can do the break fall, right? Okay. So there's a lot of that involved. So that whole chapter of preparation is I take very seriously, and since '98 when I started my club, I've never had a serious injury in class.
Do you give supplementary exercises or different things like you have beginners work on? Is there anything
Oh,
you give them, like a curriculum?
Absolutely. I mean, we do. I mean, I should just videotape a class that we do, but we do a lot of low jumps.
Okay.
We do a lot of plyometrics. Okay, where the joints are, used in an explosive manner. Right. So I'm not a big fan of exercise machines like what is this thing called? Can't think of it now. That are round with pedals on it.
Like arm bike or?
No, they came out with those saying it's
elliptical.
Good for ellipticals, yeah.
Okay.
They say it's good for your knees and stuff. And I think it is not natural and it's not good for your knees. I think it's actually bad for your knees.
Why do you think that?
I think you can, if your knees are already messed up and that's all you can do, I think you're probably okay with it if it helps you.
Okay.
But I think a healthy person, right? A healthy person, your joints, your cartilage, your synovial fluid, that stuff needs to get stimulated.
Okay.
And it gets stimulated by some kind of impact. It doesn't need to be so severe that the damn cartilage busts off the joint, know. But I think a certain amount of impact is actually a stimulant, and it's not that bad. And I think if you run on a treadmill and you have, some padding, it's probably way better than an elliptical for a healthy person.
Yeah. I think that it can be an unnatural movement. I think some people do have some pain with them. Depends if they're. I think it's just everybody's body is different and it responds differently. Some people can handle, running. Some people can, or some people need a supplement. I think I wouldn't just do the elliptical or just run. I would add, different, like a rower or, different type of things. I agree with that. But I think working the body in different ways, not doing the same thing to kind of limit, the body acclimating to something.
So another thing that we do for preparation is the stretching exercises, flexing the joints and holding the flex up to 10 seconds. So we're doing a lot on the hips, especially. We split the legs apart and arc left and right, and do a lot of hamstring stretches. Then we do hip stretches. Bend the leg any which way it might be bent, and hold against the resistance. To get the muscles and the tendons and ligaments all lined up to where they can take a little bit more each time and stimulate the body in those ways. And that goes a long way, because if you're not completely warmed up and you're doing an explosive move, you can even if you don't tear something big, you can cause a discomfort that will stay with you for days.
Sure. Or it can lead to other,
and then you're like sore over here and you're not doing the technique right. So there's a lot of that, these preparations in there. And we spend about 25 minutes, doing this stuff, but one after the other, to cardio, same thing. We do a little bit of cardio, a little bit of strength, a little bit of stretching, lots of agility where you, I may hold the guy's leg up and yank his leg around any which direction.
Okay.
And hurl him around me in a circle, and he has to balance that out on that one leg. Okay. Stuff like that. And I may have him from behind where he doesn't see, and I may yank him around. He has to adjust his stance on that one leg. And then we do the other side and so on and so forth. So everything is on the own body. Although I think weight training can be very beneficial for judo.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has to be done right. And most people that I see that go to the gym, the way they train would not be so beneficial to the judo. They do far too few reps and far too much weight, right? And it just it just doesn't help you that much with the judo, and probably not with the jiu-jitsu either. So what happens is you get these guys that have huge pecs and huge biceps and stuff because they do very few reps, and when you see them, they gas very fast. And that's been known for, probably 50 or 60 years that, boxers that are really big, they can't go very long, and that's actually true.
Well, yeah, larger, they have more muscle mass, so it requires more blood to,
if you grow the muscle mass, if you do that, and you can and get away with, you have to have the lung capacity and the liver capacity for your energy that goes along with it. Because if you just build the muscles up, you will not provide enough energy to the muscles that in that fast of a time that you need it for in a match. So you need to prepare in more than one dimension.
So you do primarily, sounds like, when you warm up, you do more dynamic exercises, so more like getting into positions or warming up the tissue with movements, not really like. So I think what that sounds like is doing kind of like mental, in my opinion, from a physical therapy standpoint. Obviously, you're warming up the tissue with blood flow, circulation, and some light stretching, but you're also building those like neurological pathways almost, like you're building muscle memory and reaction time.
Right. So there is the physiological aspect of it, of increasing, say, the stretching angles, right?
Sure. Yeah, the range of motion.
And improving the strength and push-ups and stuff like that, right? There's that purely physiological part, and then there's the psychological part also, right? Where you combine that with a meaningful way, to that's applicable to the martial art, you know. So yeah, those two have to kind of go together,
Yeah, I think it's where drilling, obviously drilling and repetitions and practice comes in, because I think you're building those pathways.
But you know that from jiu-jitsu, if you have a guy that say like Matt, he has a very good triangle, right, from the front. So the danger is that, yes, you want to always improve your triangle, but that you will overdo that triangle, right? Let's just say because you're doing it, you're going to all the clubs and you're just doing the triangle, right? You do a little bit, but they always do the triangle, right? Eventually, a guy is going to be bigger and he's going to fight a little bit more, and he's going to, maybe compromise your knee, a ligament or something on it, right?
Maybe.
But you go on and so forth, right? You're eventually going to develop you're going to be a little bit lopsided, from overgrowing one aspect of it.
Okay.
So we do these other exercises, these other supporting exercises to kind of balance the body back out. Okay. That's a part of it. And then, the judo throws themselves, if we practice uchikomis, which are repetitive exercises of a technique, a throw, by doing only the first and the second part of the three parts, right? The off-balancing and the fitting into the throw, but not the actual throw,
not
right?
The takedown aspect.
So we do those. That itself is a very good exercise for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're, you could be a soccer player, you'd benefit from it, because you're using your own weight, the other person's weight. You're loading him on, and you're using your legs. You're using stepping. You're using breathing. It's kind of like jogging. Whatever you want. Right? It's a very applicable exercise to the martial art, and it's very healthy anyway. To do that stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's. Is there certain muscle groups you see that are neglected, or do you feel like there's imbalances in certain muscle groups? With judo?
Absolutely. Almost across the board, people do not have good enough leg muscles. And what I mean by that is that not strong enough quadriceps.
Okay, the front of the leg.
calves, hamstrings, butt, back,
Yeah.
right? That's usually where, almost nobody has that, right? So the first couple of weeks, we focus so much on the legs, because they just don't move well. They just can't get into the throw. I could show you. I have guys that you can have guys that are weightlifters that can squat, 400 or 500 pounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they still don't have the leg strength to balance themselves off.
Yeah, I think it's the angle almost. So it's like where they have strength in certain angles. So if their weight is distributed a certain way, but if their body's aligned a certain way, they may not have the explosiveness or strength
to balance themselves out. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time on that, and legs is a big one. Shoulders is another one, right? Judo is of all of the muscles, all the joints. I think in judo, the shoulders it's the hardest on the shoulders.
Is it because of landing on the shoulder, landing on the way you land with a break fall, or?
I actually don't even believe it's because of the throwing or the landing on it. I believe it's purely of how much you use it. Overuse injuries. For instance, you go from a throw to a ground game to a pin to a guy trying to yank your arm out of the socket. And just all of that together, condensed into a few minutes. It's just more than, you do in any other sport. I think in Jiu-Jitsu probably too, if you go at a high level, they probably have also shoulder issues after a while.
Yeah, I think shoulder, and I've read actually that elbows are shoulder and elbow are kind of the most affected, just because, arm locks, Kimuras, so just a lot of attacks, a lot of straight arm locks,
Yeah.
Kimuras,
so
you can submit,
what can you do? I mean, that's when I use a lot of bungee training.
Yeah, like resistance bands.
Weight training, and I do a very extensive exercise program for my shoulders at least 3 times a week.
Like, what are some things you like to do?
Well, I take 2 fairly light. I like to start out with very light weights. And, a lot of people will say these are sissy weights that you're using. And a lot of the gyms, like the one at Fort Knox where I train, they don't even have them. So I use just the weights themselves,
Yeah, like the round discs.
The round discs, yeah. So I like to stand there. I could show you if I turn the light on. Hang on, I think it's getting dark. But I start out. Move the armchair here. So I start out just raising them up.
So lateral raises, shoulder raises.
Just like that, and I may only have like 5 or 10 pounds.
Uh-huh.
I extend my arms out, however. When people use a heavier weight and you see them doing this.
Yeah,
right?
the arms bent.
It's not all that bad. It feels more up here, but I like to have all of this hidden stuff, right? So I like to use the light weights. I do the thumb up, and then I do it with the thumb down, right? Uh-huh. Then another thing is I would sit down on the bench and take, again, light weights, maybe 8 or 10 pound weights, and I just take them and just push them straight up.
Like a military press.
Yeah, but just with dumbbells, right? But but you know how many of those I do? I do 30 reps of those.
30 reps. So you're doing more high rep, more endurance, kind of stability type. Actually, not doing really heavy weight, yeah.
And if you do jiu-jitsu and judo and grappling, I think there's a bit more beneficial to you. Because over the 5 minutes, these little muscles, they wear down and you can get a tear.
Sure.
But, you may say, oh, yeah, I'm going to do bench press. I'm going to be so strong. But if you do bench press, you're only training the shoulder in one direction.
Absolutely.
And the other muscles, there's the rotator cuff muscles, there's the latissimus, there's all the deltoid muscles and all that stuff. You're going to work some of them, but you're not going to work all of that. And if you were to work all of it, you're going to spend every day 5 or 6 hours in the gym. If you wanted to do sets of them and pyramid training and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't do many sets of this. I do one set each.
So you do like one set of 30.
I do a whole lot of reps. Now, when I do bench press, which I also do, I do 3 sets, but I do 15 reps.
Okay.
Okay. If I do squats, I do 20. I do always 20 reps.
20 reps.
You know.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. You know, the higher when I train actually, and some of the things that I see that a lot of jiu-jitsu players have, they're really rounded through their shoulders. You know, because you're kind of closed in position, so you have a lot of weakness in the hips, like in the back, like the glutes and the back of the hips, and the back of the shoulders, and your shoulder blade stability muscles, and so those are a lot of not terribly strong muscles, but they're really important because they get kind of overpowered by your hip flexors and those other things. But you're right. You know, think about how we're sitting right now. You know, the quads are in a lengthened. You know, the hip flexor is shortened, but the quads kind of lengthened, and the hip, and then the glutes are kind of lengthened, and the hamstrings shortened. It's just you get these muscle imbalances from sitting all day, and then you know, and then those muscles don't fire like they're supposed to, and they don't activate, and so. I like adding, like you said, I like to almost like build a little bit of a strength base. So I like to do maybe 10 to 12 reps. I like to do that. And I'll do some explosive movements. Like I'll do just, you know, quick lifting, you know, like I will do deadlifts, but you can do, you know, deadlifts with a little more explosive movements. And I like that because I think it simulates those, it gets those nerves kind of working and gets your body used to, you know, Get somebody used to the impact and
a lot of that stuff you do is because you don't do the judo like we do, right? So you gotta find gotta find a way to come to a balance, right? And that's important. I think if I didn't do the judo, I would do deadlifts. You know, I would do deadlifts a lot more, but we do so much leg and back exercises. That's already there a lot, you know.
What do you feel is one of the most important muscle groups? Like, what do you feel like somebody should have to have a solid judo game? Like, what are some muscles they need to develop? Just like, do you feel like it's the shoulders, certain part of the shoulders? Is it the core? Is it the glutes? If you had to pick like one muscle group where it's somebody.
I tell you what, if you look at judo and you think of it as a mystery, how does this work? You know, how is this going to work? You know, and you think like, this is amazing. How did it work? You know, it's usually because of the kuzushi, which is the off balancing.
Okay.
Right, and the off balancing when you watch YouTubes of the guys in the top level right now. It's their step. When their step hits the ground, right, their body has a huge, unbelievable pulling action on. Okay? Right from that.
Right.
A real pull. And that real pulling action can only happen if the whole body is engaged. It's not the arm. Arms play a role. The back plays a role. The legs play a role, right?
Sure.
The quads, everything, the glutes, everything is engaged to its maximum potential. Mm-hmm. That's what makes this thing fire that fast. So if I tell you each muscle group like that we named, like the back, the core, the shoulders, the neck, all of that is important, right? Mm-hmm. But what makes the difference is how well they work together.
Okay, that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So isolation of a muscle is necessary if that muscle is underdeveloped. So that's what I do with these guys. They come to class and they're out of shape, especially these teenagers nowadays. Unbelievable, right? You got to spend. They didn't play ball at home,
right.
or anything. They're so underdeveloped in their physique that you know you got to start over, right? Yes, you need to isolate some stuff and work on it and get it up to a decent level. And they're young and they usually grow out of that, and they adapt, right? But at the end, when you have a normal physique, normal meaning developed physique, shoulders are well built and all of that, then it comes down to having the muscles work together, what they call a compound exercise, right? Exercise where you use, your whole body, right? Yeah.
What do you think is, as far as if you're going to perform a judo throw? I think you kind of answered this question. What's the most important thing? I think you said maybe the off balancing, or if there's one aspect, like if you have to say, grips or foot placement or hip plate, whatever. What do you think is like the most important thing to make a successful judo throw?
Right. So it's a very, very good question, and I talk actually about that quite a bit. The way I answer this question is, what is the hardest to learn? Okay, what takes the longest to comprehend and to figure out and to do, right? Because that's also the one that you would want to spend the most time with to figure out, right?
Yeah.
And to me, I was almost a black belt until I really figured it out. Until finally light came on and said, that's how you do the Kazushi, right? But you can't, I could write a book about it. I could make a slide presentation for you. I could make a video for you and all of that. Nothing replaces how you actually do it yourself and feel you got to go through the whole school yourself. Yeah, I had all of that available. I was fortunate to have some of the best instructors in the world.
Yeah.
But unless you try it and fail and try again and have some success and then try again and go back and forth, you will not really figure it out. But the Kazushi is pretty much the hardest. Now, after that, I would say the next thing is your leg speed, your steps. Right, so your stepping is in part genetic. How fast can you get your feet moving? That's genetics to a large extent, but you can improve it through exercises to a good acceptable level. Mm-hmm. But so your leg speed has to be good enough. Finally, your balance in the turn. These are things that you'll figure out after a while, and the necessary strength. So. Kazushi is no doubt the hardest to learn, takes the longest to learn, and it's very perishable. Okay, if you don't do it, it's not like learning how to ride a bicycle. Okay, if you don't do Kazushi for 3 or 4 years, you might have the knowledge, you might have an advantage of getting there faster again, but don't be fooled that you can still throw somebody with a Seoinage in a self-defense situation if you haven't done judo for 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean anything. You could be the world champion. You could be the world champion today and not train judo for 5 years, and your judo will not work.
Really?
If you do not train.
So what do you feel like is, you said you had a break for about 6 months when you came to the States. What do you feel was like a sweet spot? How many times a week do you want to train, or do you like to train, and what's the intensity you like to keep it at?
Oh, I liked, back then when I was in my early 30s, or like just 30, 29, 30, I trained 5 days a week.
Wow.
And I trained three out of the 5 days, which ideally would be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I train very hard with randori. I mean, with intense sparring in the ground and in stand-up, right? I would, and the other days, I would train very lightly, very light. I would do things outside of judo. I would either go to the gym and lift weights, and I call that light, but it is not as hard as judo.
Sure.
And then I would go, and I'd do a lot of wind sprints, and I'd do a lot of running.
Yeah.
To improve my leg speed and that cardio and have that ability, to me, if I could run a very good pace for 20 minutes with some sprints in the middle, then I knew it was ready for contest.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ways that when I do tournaments for cardio, that's probably one of my best. What I've seen has the best effect on my cardio is I do sprint work. I do running with sprints mixed in to try to get my heart rate up and then get it back down and get more efficient. And I think that's one of the things for my cardio, probably one of the best things I can do, even though I hate running. I despise that. I'd rather just some people can do jiu-jitsu or grapple to get better cardio, and that's part of it. But I feel like that's not everything because you got to have a bit of a base. And I think for me, the best thing and not everybody's the same. You may say something else is different or better for you. But yeah, I like the sprint work, the running, and my body can't handle it. Thank goodness, I still have pretty good knees and everything. But the sprint work mixed in with running, I think, has been the most for my cardiovascular. And when I don't do that and I don't get in the gym as regularly, then my cardio declines so quickly.
I think in spite of the versatility of judo and of jiu-jitsu, right, even if you did both of them, there would be still the need for some exercising outside of that.
Yes.
To provide the robustness and the balance to the muscle groups. And, and also both of them are trained inside a gym. It's nice to be at fresh air.
Sure.
Right? A lot of exercising at fresh air has its own benefit, a unique benefit that we just, unfortunately, if we're always in a gym, we don't get that fresh air benefit. A lot of times these things, don't have the oxygen, don't have all of the, it's just not the same. As I live on a farm, I'm out here, I run through the woods, I cut trees, I move them around and do that kind of stuff, I like working outside.
Yeah, it's a different way to work your body too. It's something, just doing active, functional things. So when you came to the States and you started training at Bellarmine, how did you assimilate into that? Did you start training all the time? Did you
whenever they had class, I think they had class twice a week then, I would go, and then I met other folks that also had judo clubs in Louisville, and I trained with them. I eventually met Mike Rose, and he had a club at the Downtown Athletic Club down on Broadway, and I would go there for years and train with him. And then, so how did I assimilate? I think I just did as best as I could with what was there as far as members, It was hard to find the same kind of, high-level competition people. There were fewer, but, you make it work. The mutual benefits concept set in. I wanted to have better, stronger partners, so I taught them more.
Right.
I showed them more so they could get better, and with it I got better. I remember that. Do you know a guy named Jarvis? That's maybe before your time. He was a pro boxer, a heavyweight boxer from Louisville. Black guy, really nice guy, strong, tall. And this was at the time the UFCs came around, and it was maybe 94 or something like this. I was at the Downtown Athletic Club, and Jarvis came in, and he said he watched the UFC stuff, and he doesn't get it that stuff actually works, that you can actually use grappling, right? And he didn't want to go UFC or anything like that, but he came into the judo club and he says, I just want to go with one of y'all and see how that is. So my instructor then, Mike Rose, says, well, let's just go with Ed here, right? So we gave him a gi top, and I think he was wearing shorts, and I had my gi on, and I just grappled with him and threw him and did ground game with him. He didn't want to box or anything. It was not a UFC type thing where boxer against judo guy. It wasn't like that.
I just wanted to see what you guys did.
he just wanted to see, is this stuff really possible, you know, if you resist and stuff. And, you know, for me, it was like beginner, right? It didn't matter. It was very easy to do everything to the guy, right? I mean, including submissions and all of that stuff. It was there was nothing to it because he was not schooled in any of that, right?
Right.
And you know, it was a friendly setting, and you know, interestingly, he soon quit his boxing career and started judo. And he then trained at Bellarmine College, and then he enrolled his kids in judo, and I saw him at a few tournaments, but I don't know what became of him. But that's just to give you an idea how that was back then, you know. People didn't really believe what they saw on TV, even if it was presented like that, you know.
Yeah. Did you try to compete in the States at all, like at a higher level? Did you try to do, and I don't know exactly what the format is, obviously, for Jiu-Jitsu, it's IBJJF and the World and all that.
I went to a lot of tournaments over here. I went to America's Cup up in Indianapolis. I won that, I think, twice. I went to Dayton, Ohio. We went all over the place. And then I went to the two national events that I both won. One in Chicago and the other one in Indianapolis. And then I went up to Canada to the World Masters. It was an age group class, World Championship, and I took second in that. So that was a big international event with people from Europe and Japan and everything. So it was a big event, you know. So yeah, I think I competed, and I combined everything with the work that I was doing and building a house and all that. I always found a way to kind of keep that in it, you know.
Yeah, keep the balance.
If that makes sense, you know. So
it's it's definitely always a challenge to have enough time for everything, especially when you have kids and the wife and stuff. It's definitely one of the things I found very challenging has been to balance, work and family and jiu-jitsu and podcasting and all that stuff, but it's important. And I think there's a way, if there's a will, there's a way to do it.
So one other aspect about injury prevention, I thought about things that you were talking about, injury prevention, right? One thing that I see a lot is that people are overprotective, right? And actually defeat the purpose, okay? And that's kind of hard for some people to comprehend, but I'm going to try to take a stab at it.
Okay.
Sometimes it's how the sports develop, right? For instance, boxing. If you see pictures from the 1900s, it was bare knuckle, right? So people lost their teeth and had cuts and, maybe lost even their eye, right? And but they didn't have concussions like they have nowadays. Okay.
Because I think the research, you got to think about the research. Maybe they did. They just didn't know that they were concussed.
Well, you couldn't potentially hit this hard with your hands, or your hand would be shattered.
Okay. So
the sport brought the gloves. With that, the punches got much, much heavier.
Okay.
Because if the punch had impacted like to the jawbone on this with just the knuckle, it would have broken in. Right? You'd have basically, if Mike Tyson would hit a skull with his knuckle and let's just say his arm could stand it, he'd fist come out on the side.
Yeah, probably.
All right. So that's one part of it, right? Have you ever heard of Feldenkrais? He was a Jewish scientist and judoka. He's from Eastern Europe, if I'm not mistaken, and he wrote a book about the learning of physical education and how you learn things, how children learn things. And he applied that to the judo, and I think that judo is a great example of that learning curve, right? Because when you're doing stand-up judo and you're getting thrown, or you're getting thrown on your knees, let's just say you do a bad ukemi, okay? And you're working between bad and good, and every time you do it bad, it hurts more, right? Until you do it, you see a black belt being thrown, it looks picture perfect all the time.
Yeah, it's like,
because we never want to take a chance, right? But you get a green belt, and he thinks, now I slapped this hard, and it was great. Next time I slap a little bit less because it's more pleasant for my hand. But then they fall bad, and it hurts their hips or something, whatever, right? So you're learning through the infliction of pain and discomfort of how to do it right.
Yeah.
Right. And when we interfere in that, then we're screwing something up. And I tell you, there's many examples in the sports. Football with the helmet.
Yeah.
If there wasn't a rule against it, I think 15, 20 years ago, these guys, the NFL guys, they would head dive with their head into the other guy's knees and blow their knees out, right? Nobody in their right mind would do that in a combative situation where you wouldn't go with your head against the other guy's knees for your safety, right?
Sure.
You want to stay away from that as much as possible, but you're completely distorting life with that, right? So I like to shape the judo where people understand the technique and what they're supposed to do and build them up physically, but I do not want to take away the ability to learn through the infliction of pain and discomfort. It is an important part of judo, of the school of judo, to get bruised up, to get joints sprained. Sure. That's just what it is. And it's in its nature, in its learning value, it's as good as any piano lesson, right? You're learning a whole lot with your whole body all the time.
Yeah, learn from mistakes.
That's right. So I'm one of the people that's inherently against protective gear. The only protective gear I like is a judo mat. And that's only so the surface is the same, that it's the same everywhere. But I don't like a soft mat either. Now, the other day, one of my students came and says, I watched this video. They have this big, heavy crash mat. Yeah. Why don't we get one of those? Then we can just throw each other on that. And, the thing is, if you throw 1,000 times, if you're practicing 1,000 times a day, whatever, right? You would probably not want to throw the guy on a mat that much.
Probably not.
But he probably gets thrown in normal practice playing to remember his ukemi. If you do it at our club, where we train only twice a week and they may do 50 throws a night or so, they would fall on this mat and they would never develop their ukemi properly. Or it would have a detrimental, it would backfire more than it would help.
Yeah, because of the sheer, the fewer reps.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. Yeah, I think it's. I think when the stakes are higher, I think you're going to learn. You're going to maybe modify or adjust quicker. I just think it's the consequences, because if you land them properly, or if you hold a submission too long and you hurt somebody, it's bad for both people. I think knowing the consequences, and that's why I think less injuries when you get. I think even when you get a little more seasoned I'm sure in judo and especially in jiu-jitsu, I think some of the lower belts prefer to grapple with the upper belts because they're more controlled and they're more, the technique is better and there's more, almost like a dance, so to speak. It's almost like there's more rhythm to the movements, and you know how to counteract somebody's weight shift and attacks.
Right, it looks more finished.
Yeah, it just looks more smooth, almost like
right,
like a sequence.
And I like doing jiu-jitsu with black belts mostly only because for one I don't care, I don't mind a submission. I just don't want to get injured in the process,
Is there a certain level you put students with? Is there a certain and I'm not actually really familiar with the judo with all the belt ranks. What do you group certain levels together, or do you like to do more experienced with less experienced?
I actually I let initially meaning a year or so, I let mostly the yellow belts train with other yellow belts.
Okay, so those are beginner for
beginner level. I let them figure things out for themselves because they can very easily do stupid stuff and hurt a more advanced belt, right?
Okay.
And hurt themselves and all that. So the slower pace and them going with each other is usually fine. After that, it's open wide. I mean, anybody can go with anybody. It doesn't matter if there's a black belt going with a yellow belt or, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I go routinely with Matt, and he's a yellow belt. I mean, Monday he was promoted to orange belt. So
wow, that's awesome. I'll have to congratulate him.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing well. He's there a lot.
Yeah.
And his techniques look nice, and he's getting there. I mean,
he's doing good, man. I'm just have to. I told him I was like, I'm just have to pull guard on you, and I don't want to do that, but I don't want to get thrown. I just don't want to get thrown.
Yeah, and what a lot of people come to me with is they want to learn judo so they can have the upper hand in the jiu-jitsu match.
Yeah.
And I do a little bit of that. I show them a few things, but there's the approach to that is a longer approach. It's not like I can show them in a quick way, right?
Yeah.
It takes so much more preparation. If we talked about the physical and the psychological pieces of the stances and the posture and all that.
Sure.
Even if you lift weights and you think you're pretty fit, there's still a lot of holes in there that have to be filled through rigorous exercise and preparation. And once your stances and your relocation, your mobility is checked and your balance is checked, you'll see the openings.
Yeah.
And you can create opportunities, even if a guy's bent over and sticks his arms out and the butt to the back.
Right.
There's a lot of opportunities to attack and for a takedown. And even if you can't succeed with it, you can grind him down to where it wears him down, where if you just do the same thing he does, nobody goes anywhere.
Do you like to teach any alternate? I know since you guys do some grappling, you said you're 50-50. Do you like to teach anything like a wrestling takedown, like double leg, single leg? Is there something you just like to expose your students to?
Well, until the recent changes of the judo rules, where now double legs are not allowed, but that was one of my best techniques. Was in judo. I won the finals in Indianapolis, national finals with the double leg. We call them Morotagari, right? Single legs, ankle picks, all of that was in my game before the rules changed.
So why do they take that? Why would they take that out? What's the point? Why are you limiting? Why are you limiting the effectiveness of the sport?
What happened is and this goes pretty deep, but it'll give you something to think about after the podcast. When you look at the judo in the early 90s, Olympics, right? It's like 92 and 94 or so. You'll see that the judo got more and more and more bent over, and it almost looked like two wrestlers, but they were wearing judo gis.
Okay.
Because a single leg attack is mechanically, or double leg attack is mechanically extremely simple. And all you have to do is explode forward and lunge forward. That's very easy to practice. And you can be very quickly very successful, right? And you can short circuit all the 40 other throws of judo, the classical throws, not even teach them. And turn a guy loose into the tournament and just teach him a killer double leg. And just do that. And avoid everything. And what happened is the judo became more and more like bent over and just lunging and grabbing for the legs.
Okay.
And that defeated the martial arts aspect of it, where you're saying, I want to be able to walk in the street, a guy grabs me and I throw him, or I look for an opening of a stand-up person that maybe has a knife or a club in the hand or something like that. So in order to preserve the Gokyo no Waza, the turn-in throws and the self-defense, o uchigari, your ashiwaza and all of those techniques, they just said we're going to eliminate that for some time. Now, I'm sure at some point they're going to bring them back in. I did these routinely, so it really hurt my game. And after I had a shoulder surgery and I went back. I just didn't compete anymore because that part of the judo was then no longer allowed.
Yeah.
And
I don't know.
And then I said, well, the hell with it. I can't. I don't want to do without that.
Right,
but,
taking a big chunk of your game out.
But it was to me. I combined it with the turn-in throws. Yeah. But if you watch the young guys coming up into the Olympics, they didn't even do those. They just latched onto the leg and drove them into the ground and held them. And it was really like wrestling.
Yeah, with gis on.
Yeah, and then they said, we can't. I mean, then we might as well combine wrestling and judo or whatever. Right. It's the same thing. And then they said, well, really, people said this is not judo. I mean, it doesn't have the elements of judo anymore, so that's why they took those out. And in kata ashidori, morotegari, and kubishi daishi, all of those leg attacks, they are part of judo, right? Yeah. They were in there from the beginning, and they don't allow them now. So that's really why they made a decision to preserve the judo, or
so just at least the sport element, mainly the throws, to keep those kind of as the center point, I guess, of judo.
You could say it that way, yeah. I had a problem with it when they did it, but I looked at some of these videos, and now I can kind of follow the reasoning. I will say I probably don't want to say it was a good idea or a bad idea, right? But I can see the reasoning. I would have thought it would have been better that those guys that teach at the Olympic level would have been influenced by somebody yet higher to not do it that way, Or I just don't know how else you could do it, but at the end, at such a level, people, it's basically governments get involved, right? Yeah. Like you're representing your country. It's all about winning. It's not about the martial art. If you could take a wrestler or some other sports guy, some other athlete, and put him in a judo gi, and if he was like the specimen, the super specimen that could win against everybody would do it just to win, right? And you see that with the use of steroids in swimming and all these other disciplines. What's been going on. It's not about fair play. It's about who wins.
Well, what about like looking at wrestling? I mean, pretty much their big thing is double leg, single leg, ankle picks. those are the big things people hit. So so you think they maybe wrestlers are like the better athletes, the best athletes maybe?
I think wrestlers are very good athletes. I think judo athletes and wrestler athletes are comparable at the high level.
Okay.
They do very, very similar routines. Techniques are different, but they're both extremely very fit and very, very athletic.
Yeah. No, but I see what you're saying as far as that component of it. Keeping, I guess maybe it's the aesthetic portion of judo, kind of like jiu-jitsu. There's some, obviously point jiu-jitsu versus, or sport jiu-jitsu versus self-defense. I know you're looking at different rule sets and different positions that, rolling or inverted positions that you may not do in a self-defense situation or.
Well, you have, in the more recent jiu-jitsu, you see a lot of techniques that are not direct for a self-defense situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if the game goes too far into that direction, that a guy immediately lays down and turns upside down and sticks the legs towards you, right? That can't be the idea behind what you want to accomplish.
It is, but I think and that's something I've talked. It's the progression of the sport, and I think it's obviously progression of judo and progression of jiu-jitsu. You start with what's the best self-defense, and then you start adding pieces to it and taking stuff out, and then then it can turn into a sport type thing, and there's points involved and submissions and rule sets, and yeah, you're getting away from I don't know if it's you get more into the sport component of it basically, which is whether it's for viewing or whatever you're trying to get out of it by being there. It is, I don't know. I think sometimes maybe it loses the roots of it, like what it meant or when it was started, what it meant to be, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like the greatest. Some of them don't agree with the.
There's probably people there that will decide on that. I'm not going to decide on it. If they ask my opinion, I'll tell them.
Yeah.
It is with that stuff. It is what it is. But I just think for what the individual can do is look out what he wants to learn and what makes sense for him.
Yeah.
I think for a jiu-jitsu person to learn judo has a wealth of benefits apart from whether or not he can throw somebody in a IBJJF event. He might be able to throw somebody with the skill if he's talented enough and can pick it up still. But the other benefits we talked about today, doing the stand-up sport, learning the balance and all of that stuff,
Sure.
the physiological, the health benefits are tremendous. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. And likewise, I think that the grappling itself you can learn a lot. Study these positions better and work on some of these moves that are illegal in the judo contest. Yeah. And that's the other side of it. So
I'm definitely intrigued, as far as speaking with you as far as judo is concerned, because I'm always I like the takedown aspect. I don't think I'm the best at it or great at it. There's certain things I do okay, but I'd like to be able to maybe do some more throws or have a more dynamic game. I think for me that would just be interesting. Because sometimes off the takedown I find myself in bad positions, so I think maybe looking at judo as an option might be a good thing. So people are looking for judo in the Kentucky area, Louisville area, where you're located and where they can reach you if they want to get in contact with you.
Certainly come out and to Brandenburg. It's I guess 45 minutes from downtown Louisville.
Okay.
Several people come, like Matt comes from there. We got people coming in all the way from Evansville, Indiana,
awesome.
Which is about 2 hours away. People from New Albany show up. People just from all around. And it's, I have a mat fee. It's $8 if you're not a member. I think it's well worth it if you come in. What else is there to say?
What's the what's the name of the gym, or is there a website?
It's Toshi Dojo. It's TOSHI and then Dojo DOJO.
Okay.
It's located downtown on Broadway in Brandenburg. We have a Facebook page and we have a web page.
Awesome. ToshiDojo.com.
I think it's Toshi Dojo of Brandenburg.com.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up.
That's cool. I'll put it in. What, man? Ed, thank you. That was awesome. I appreciate it. You got so much knowledge, man. It's fun. I like talking history of martial arts and just kind of, I think we all, me personally, I want to be kind of where you are at your age. I want to be able to still, be on the mats and competing, and that's kind of my whole goal, with as a physical therapist, how to continue to do what I've been doing and get to where you're at and still be able to, be high level, in jiu-jitsu or, grappling, anything like that. So it's awesome. Yeah. I'm sure you have plenty of more amazing information, but we'll set up another time, and I'd love to have you back on.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. As always, thank you to my guest, Ed Kieslich, owner of Toshi Dojo in Brandenburg, Kentucky. Check him out on Facebook. And if you need a good place to train judo, that guy is unreal, and he's got his skill levels through the roof. And he's an awesome instructor just from the short time I got to spend with him. So thank you again for checking out the podcast, and more injury prevention tips, more podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, the website, jiu-jitsutherapist.com. If you guys have any questions, please send them my way. Make sure to leave a comment on iTunes, and that way we can keep this podcast going, and I can keep bringing on people that you guys want to listen to. And thank you for all the support, and we'll see you next time. jiu-jitsutherapist.com. Thanks, guys.